Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Andrew McCormick. So if you're listening to this podcast on the day that it comes out, January 4th, for most of us art teachers out there, this is Back to School 2.0. It's the second semester, the back half of the year for you elementary peoples out there. And I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday break filled with fun and family, that you were able to recharge those batteries and reflect a little bit on that first half of the year, and then even strategize for the remaining year. Now, some of us have had a fantastic first semester, and maybe some of us have had just kind of an average first semester, like pretty good. You take the good, take the bad. And then there's some of us out there who have struggled a little bit. And maybe it's because teaching is a pretty tough profession that, the cosmos just have a kind of a way of aligning and showing fellow art teachers that there's other art teachers out there having a rough time. I know that I've had a pretty challenging first semester, and it seems like all that I've seen reflected back to me on various social media outlets out there is a lot of art teachers out there are saying, man, 2016, this has been a pretty rough one. Okay, so a few different strategies out there, right? Heading into this new part of the year. You can hit the ground running and capitalize on a great first half, or maybe you need to pause a little bit and take stock of all the things that you might need to tweak and change a little bit. Tim Bogatz is going to come on here in a little bit and share some sage advice on how to get mentally and pragmatically ready for the start of a new semester or a new part of the year. If you're like me, you're probably looking at this time of the year and saying you've got some work to do. I've got to look at some expectations, some curriculum ideas, some management, some organization. I've got to figure some things out that can improve what I've been doing with some of my students, And the interesting thing is I have to do this with a new group of students, despite the fact that this new group that I'm having, they weren't even around for the first semester and kind of involved with, what wasn't really going so well. And then for all you elementary teachers out there, you've got, the same students, the same classes all year round. But, perhaps you've noticed some bright spots that you realize that you could push a little deeper with your students as they're just absolutely rocking it this year. Or maybe you're like me also and you've got some things that you want to tighten up a little bit, things like management, routine, to try to get some better student outcomes or kind of a better environment going. In some ways, I think that elementary teachers, you guys have a tougher job when it comes to restarting the second half of the year. I mean, as secondary people, we often get a whole new batch of students with a whole new chemistry and makeup. So recharging at semester, I know that Tim and I are going to be talking a lot about classroom management more than anything else. If things are going great for you and you just kind of want to up your game, maybe you're thinking about spicing up your curriculum. But even for teachers out there where things are going great, you're still going to need to teach and reteach some classroom expectations. So when I think about my classroom management, it's kind of a sliding scale. Sometimes I think I'm just absolutely nailing it, and some days I think that my students are absolutely nailing me. And that's why I think AOE's class, Managing the Art Room, is such a great asset for teachers. I mean, maybe you need to pick up some new tricks, or maybe you just need to rekindle that commitment to being transparent and consistent with your expectations and rules. Either way, I think you're really going to love learning in this class with your fellow classmates. Reclaim your room and reclaim your sanity. Managing the Art Room is a 2-credit class, and it begins at the beginning of every month. So head on over to theartofed.com and check it out. All right, let's bring on Tim to see if he'll have some sage advice on restarting and recharging for the second half of the school year. All right, Tim, thanks for joining me, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to talk to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so, we're going to talk second semester, and, I've always thought that starting off the second semester is a little different than starting off the beginning of the school year, so let's paint the picture here. I know a lot of secondary teachers out there are maybe starting a second semester today or like in a week or so, so we're right at that time. I find, maybe with a new group of kids, they're a little smarter, a little hip, wiser to the way the school year is going, but maybe they're a little more jaded, cynical, burnout. Maybe they're ready to make amends for like a crappy first semester. So, I find that the beginning of the school year, everyone's trying really hard to have a good start. Second semester, it's a little different. There's some landmines we got to navigate. So I got to ask you, you're jumping into second semester. What's your MO? Do you get right into it, or do you kind of ease slowly back into it?
Yeah, I like to jump right in because I feel like every other class that a kid goes to, they're easing back into it and they're doing boring stuff like going over rules, going over procedures, reading through the syllabus. And I mean, that's just terrible, honestly. Like it's really boring to do that for the teacher and for the kids. So I think it's important to shake it up right away and start making some art. Like we had Janine Campbell on a little while back talking about all the amazing things that she does on the first day. And I think that's the mindset that you need to have. Like if we want to get kids excited about art, like let's get them going. Let's start making art. Like you said, everybody's ready to start fresh. And so whether you're getting new kids or whether you're keeping the same kids, just look at it as, a fresh start, and you can get rid of whatever preconceived notions that you have about the kids in your class, whether it be behavior issues or art making skill or whatever, and give them a fresh start. You do a fresh start yourself, get in there with some new projects and get started right away. I mean, that's my way of doing it. But what about you? Like, are you along those same lines, or do you like to ease back in?
I've kind of done both, and it really, to me, it kind of depends. I think it kind of depends. I like in theory what you're saying about ditching those preconceived notions and ideas. But at the same time, if you've noticed the first year or the first semester, some things that you want to correct, this kind of is your time to fix and recalibrate and do some of that. So, this is kind of a long answer, but I think when things have been going well, I jump right into it and I just want to maintain that momentum and capitalize on that. But if I've had a first semester where there's been some big issues, I might kind of ease into it and kind of like air some of that out a little bit and say like, okay, this, and this, not so much. Like we got to tighten this up and fix it. So I think it's kind of like on a case by case, semester by semester, year by year sort of situation. I like to jump in, but sometimes I think now's the time to address some of those things. So,
yeah,
so thinking about that, let's say that there's teachers out there who've had maybe a rough first semester. Maybe you have this long laundry list of things that you want to fix or change. Do you start that second semester off with like some new goals, a new mantra? If you do create some new goals, how do you go about creating those things for people out there?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I guess I'll look at this like if, like you said, you had a class that did not go so well, look at second semester as a chance to reset or a chance to restart. And, if you're talking about goals with what you want to do with your classes, like sit them down and talk to them about that. And if you're dead set on like making artwork the first day, you can talk about those things while you're playing with clay, while you're sketching or doodling or whatever. But the important part here is like, if you want to reset, like now is the time to do it. And so you can say, hey, we had issues with behavior. This is a fresh start for you guys. This is your chance to show me, that you know how to act, that you know how to take care of materials, you know how to treat each other, whatever the case may be. And just lay out your expectations for them. Make that a conversation with your class. Like, what didn't go well before? What can we change? What do we need to do differently? And get them involved with kind of that reset. And you can set goals with them. Like, we are going to have, this many days of good behavior, or, all of our artworks will be this good, or we'll have, this few missing assignments, whatever it may be. Talk to them about the goals you want. Make your students part of that goal setting process. And like I said, take this opportunity to kind of reset things and give them a fresh start, whether that be for behavior, for art making, whatever the case may be. Take this chance to start new.
So I like we're kind of talking strategies to reset, and I like the, kind of involve the students in. I think that's a huge thing. And I think it's not bad. It's not a sign of weakness as a teacher to confess to your students, and maybe they're new and maybe they had no part of a rough semester, or, we can flip this around and maybe they weren't part of a great semester. But to share that with them and say, okay, guys, I had this same class, this same drawing class or ceramics class or ninth grade art, and last semester, this, and this kind of drove me bonkers, and it wasn't good, and students weren't engaged, and, kids were screwing around. I don't think that that's a sign of weakness, but here's my big question. Do you ever feel like sometimes as teachers, we hold something against a new group of people that was like an offense committed by an old group of people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, it makes it difficult because you need to get those things out there for your students so they kind of know what expectations are. But at the same time, like, they don't want to be compared to other classes. Like, they aren't other classes. And so it makes it difficult. Like, you're kind of putting them in a difficult spot when you start to compare them to other classes. And so, right. I don't know, I think it's good to have that discussion with them, but at the same time, I think it's important to still let them know that, hey, I'm still in charge, you know, and these are the things that I expect from you. I think it's really going to put you in a difficult spot if you say, oh, these are the things that annoy me. Please don't do that. And what do you guys think the rules should be? Like, you're handing over a little bit too much to them. So like I said, I think, you know, it's good to have kids involved in that discussion, you know, whether it be, you know, whatever goals you're trying to set, but at the same time, like, you still need to lead that.
And I think this is a moment where, as a teacher, when you're kind of recalibrating at the semester, resetting some goals, thinking about what you want to fix, that you have to be sort of like a linguistic acrobat, and what you say and how you say it's really important. Because if you say, oh man, all of my kids last semester did this and this, and you guys, I don't want you to do that, you're really kind of starting off on a negative tone, and that's where kids are going to feel like, man, I'm getting yelled at for something that I wasn't even a part of or involved with. But you don't want to just sweep that under the rug and not acknowledge it. So I think that's where the gymnastics are. You could say, listen, guys, my goal for myself as a teacher is that you all, and then spin it to the positive, are super engaged with your artwork. And maybe you don't even have to say that, like, because last semester, all those jokers, they weren't into it. Right. And I had, you know, I had this class not good. You don't have to maybe go there, but it can be more about you as the art teacher and less about you, when like you don't even really know these people yet. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah,
it does. And I was just going to say, the way I approached this with my classes was that I would always go in and say, you know, just start like, hey guys, you know how we always reflect on our artwork, on our art making process, you know, and just, you know, talk about everything that we do to get to a certain point. And I just tell them, I like to do that same thing as a teacher. And, you know, over break, I was thinking about this, and this, and I realized that these are the things that, you know, I want to do better in this classroom, and lay it out for them. Like, these are the things that I want to get better. And in order for those things to get better, I need this, and this from you. And then that just opens up a big discussion on, like I said, whatever it is that you need to talk about. But I think if you can kind of model that reflective approach for them, then it establishes kind of what we're looking for here with the reset, the restart, or whatever new things you want to do. And B, it really, like I said, models for them and shows them a good example of how the reflective process can work, not only in art, but, you know, in other areas as well. So I think that's a good way to approach it.
You know, and there's not a teacher out there, the most awesome, amazing teachers out there amongst us, who think that they've ever had a semester and had a class that went absolutely 100% perfect. There's always little things to tweak and fix, and this procedure, this routine, this project, et cetera, et cetera. But I've found when I get, because I can get kind of like, you know, a little uptight or upset about the way things are going. I think as teachers, we always have to spin it to the positive. There's this old adage, you know, that you'll attract more flies with honey than vinegar. Right. You're going to get more positive results from your students when you can reframe it in a positive way than this sort of like negative, naggy, you kids never clean up your brushes well. I mean, just the simple rephrasing of, you know what I love about this class? You guys always do such a great job of cleaning up at the end of the day. Even if that is just a bold-faced lie, the kids who are like not doing a good job, you're like, huh, I better do a good job. And maybe your kids are savvy enough to know you're being a little sarcastic, but boy, it sounds so much better than just like, you know, airing out all these grievances in kind of a negative way.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, that's just a basic classroom management thing that I think is really important. You know, spin to the positive. Like, you don't I don't know, as a student, you don't want to hear you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. Like, how about, you tell me how I can do it right? Like, show your
Right.
kids, this is how I'm expecting you to clean up brushes. And then when they do it, reward them, praise them. And yeah, show them how things need to be done instead of just yelling at them about how they shouldn't be done or how they're being
Right.
done wrong.
So, man, we've been focusing a lot on like how to fix all the negative things and all the things that have gone wrong. And I think for the savvy listeners out there, they're like, man, Andrew's had a really rough first semester. And they probably aren't too off the mark there. But let's flip this up a little bit, switch it around. Let's think about, you had an amazing semester, just like all your classes are clicking and, firing on all cylinders and doing some good work. How do you build on this? How do you keep that momentum going? Because that's a little bit of a different thing, different set of strategies than we've been talking about.
Yeah, so I think it's the same thing, though, in a lot of ways, where you can still talk to your kids and say, hey, these are the things that went really well last semester, and here's how I want to build on them. And so, again, involve them with that discussion about, hey, how can we take our artwork to the next level? Or, you've shown me that I can trust you guys with, X, Y, and Z. What kind of new things would you like to try? And I think it's important to be willing, like if things are going really well, to be willing to open up new ideas, new media, new projects, or even just pushing your existing projects kind of to the next level and pushing your kids to the next level. So if you have things that are going really well, think about how you can do that even better. So again, it still goes back to that reflection piece, but instead of, figuring out what you need to change, figure out how you can make the good even better.
Yeah, I like that idea of kind of stretching above and beyond. We've mastered this. What else is out there on the horizon? So let's get back to talking about the negative stuff, though, Tim. Okay, worst semester, worst class you've ever had. Okay, picture that class in your mind. Even in that, did you do like a whole drastic overhaul, or did you pick like, boy, I got to pick, 2 winnable battles I'm going to try to fix this and this? Have you ever done a drastic overhaul, or do you just pick a couple things?
I've done both. And honestly, the drastic overhaul, like if your class is that bad, it can really be too much. Like, I don't know, like with my very worst classes, I think trying to change absolutely everything is a battle that you can't win. And I think if you're trying to, there's 14 things wrong with this class, like you're not going to fix all 14 of them. So maybe you pick, these are the 3 things that annoy me the most. Like side conversations are a problem. You guys are not working during class and, we're not getting any work turned in on the due dates. And like, those are the battles that I'm going to fight this semester. And I mean, don't go to your kids and say, I'm fighting with you on this, but, go to them and say, hey, here's what needs to change. Like when I'm demonstrating, talking needs to stop, et cetera, et cetera. And just kind of get into that conversation about what behaviors need to change. And I think there are times that you can make a whole overhaul work, especially, this is the time to do it. Okay. So if you are going to try that, then, at semester is the time to go for it. But I think you can get into a little bit of trouble if you bite off more than you can chew. And, I think if you just kind of lay out your priorities and say, we're going to fix these 2 things first and then slowly build from there, I think that's a better way to go about it than just coming in and be like, guys, we're changing everything.
Right. Everything's being changed. Well, and I can list, like I can get into the like long laundry list of things I'd like to fix. But to me, everything comes back to kind of a keeping it simple for the students and just say, listen, no one signed up for this class to make really bad artwork. Can we all agree to that? And then everyone's like, yeah. Right. Like no one signed up to make embarrassingly horrible artwork. So this behavior, this, those are all things that are preventing us from making the best work possible. And this is why, I call you out on it. I remind you of it. I demonstrate it. Like case closed. Like it's just about making really awesome, quality, meaningful artwork. So let's switch gears just a little bit here. So we're kind of assuming that everyone is, halfway through the year, right around Christmas break, like getting all new kids and new semesters, and we're all secondary teachers. There's plenty of elementary teachers out there, and there's even secondary teachers who keep their kids all year long. So let's say, I mean, are there some tips and tricks for teachers out there who are dealing with that? Like, okay, I'm coming back from Christmas break, but I know I'm going to see the same group of kids. How do those kids kind of reset? Or how do those teachers reset? I mean,
Yeah, I think it's good at that point to, again, go back to that reflective piece and just think about your classes and think, hey, what went well with these guys and what can we build off of here? Like, what are the strengths of this class? What do they enjoy doing? And how can we take that to the next level? Like, you have some fourth graders that absolutely love doing weaving, for example. Okay, think about, hey, what are some new projects that they could really dive into, or how can we extend some of those projects that they loved? Okay, or you have some second graders that loved painting. Like, maybe if they did watercolor before, show them some tempera now. Or, they love doing these sculptures, maybe you get them some clay, and just kind of think about, those kids, them well from a semester of work. So think about what they do well, what their strengths are, and think about, like I said, how you can extend those ideas, how you can build on those things and really take things to the next level. Because like I said, what kind of behaviors you're going to be getting, what the kids enjoy, what the kids are good at. And so if you can build on those things, then you're going to have an even more successful second semester.
Yeah. And, just like all teachers want to do well, I sincerely think that all kids really do want to do well. And if we keep that in mind, if there have been little things, classroom management or focus or engagement things, just kind of remind them about that. Like, listen, we had a little break here. There's a little opportunity for us to think about the fact that you really do want to succeed in art and have a good year. And let's kind of think of some ways, again, kind of enlisting them to help you think about that. Could be a nice kind of way to like reset for the rest of the year. So
yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea.
Well, man, we're right at that time of year where we're restarting, and I know we got to kind of wrap this up. So I feel like you are just this treasure trove of inspiration, man, for those of us out there who are trying to reset and rebuild and reboot. So you got any last gems of wisdom to get our minds right on this upcoming second semester or second half of the year?
No, I would say just two things. Reflection is huge. That's the biggest thing. Spend time thinking about, like I said, each of your classes, what has gone well with them, what hasn't. And I think second thing more than anything is just kind of keep a positive outlook, not only with yourself, but, the way you're dealing with kids. And so, like I said, if things are going well, embrace that positivity and make sure you keep things going well. See if you can get them to be going even better. And if things have not gone well for that first semester, keep that positive outlook and tell yourself, this is my chance to reset. This is my chance to change. Tell your kids that this is how we're going to fix that. This is how we're going to get back to making the successful artwork like you talked about, and show them the way to do that. Don't just tell them everything that they did wrong. Okay. But tell them, this is what I want to change. This is why it's going to help. Here's how we get there, and keep that positive outlook as you reteach those expectations to your kids. And like I said, this is the perfect opportunity. So, if you put the amount of time in that you need with reflection and you deal with things the right way with your classes with that positive outlook, then, you can really embrace this opportunity to reset and really start off that second semester strong.
All right, man. Well, thank you, Mr. Sunshine. I'm going to do all those things. I'm going to reflect. And I'm going to keep it positive, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to whip those kids into shape for second semester. We're going to have a great second semester.
Hey, I think this is the first time in 40 some episodes that you've ever thought of me as bright and sunny. So that's pretty exciting.
All right. Well, you better cherish it, man.
Yeah, that's a good note to go out on. So,
all right. We'll see you later.
Thanks, man.
Well, despite the fact that Tim doesn't see himself as a ray of sunshine, I absolutely loved his tips and wisdom that he shared. Be reflective and honest with yourself on how things went, what things you want to change and improve upon. But I think most importantly, remember to always keep it positive. If things haven't gone well, what can you realistically change and fix? There's this saying out there about systems and results, and it goes something like this, that every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets, right? So the classrooms that we currently have, and all of its intended or unintended consequences, we're largely responsible for creating it. Now, of course, there's always going to be some outside mitigating factors, but most of those things are things that we can't change anyway. So stay positive and focus on what you really can change. And while I know that this is a grandiose quote that I'm about to drop next, and it gets misattributed all the time and tagged on everything from sleeve tattoos to bumper stickers, you really can be the change that you want to see in the world. Thinking globally, this means that as art teachers, we really do affect change as we shape creative minds. Thinking more locally, the positive attitude that you display can make for an awesome second half of the year. Go get 'em, Tiger. Art Ed Radio is developed, produced, and supported by the Art of Education with audio engineering by Michael Crocker. So AOE's Art Ed Now conference is just about a month away. Now, while you might have missed the early bird pricing discount, there's still time to head on over to theartofed.com and register to join this online conference. Join a few thousand fellow art teachers for some ridiculously relevant PD. I know the holiday season has kind of come and gone, but I still think there's enough festive spirit left out there that I can encourage you to go on and treat yourself. I guarantee that you'll love this conference that the good folks at the Art of Ed have put together. As always, new episodes of Art Ed Radio will be released every Tuesday, and additional content can be found under the podcast tab on theartofed.com. Thanks for listening.